This video is brought to you by A-Main Hobbies, RC Trophy Chasers, and Cow RC. Click the links in the description below. Last year I did a video on my experience running the race held up in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Georgia called the North GA Shootout. Because I enjoyed myself so much, I decided to head up there and again to see the level of progress I've made in a year and to see whether or not the Agama N1E could handle an American blown out track. In this video, we'll be going over some things on how to watch out for in a leaner styled race like this, how the Agama did, and finally, how I personally did. Before we begin however, I'd like to thank my sponsors, starting with Cow RC. Cow RC is the main place to get all your quality RC cleaning supplies, from tire cleaner that doesn't dry out your tires, to magnetic rubber mats that keep this from happening, and many other things that will help you keep your rig looking its best. If you'd like to save a bit on your next purchase from them, be sure to use code ROACHRC, all caps, on cowrc.com. Next up, I'd like to thank RC Trophy Chasers. RC Trophy Chasers is a hobby shop based in the Carolinas, and they stock DFX batteries, Motive motors, and Mach 1 servos, all of which I've personally tested and very much enjoy. If you'd like to save 10% off everything you buy from them, be sure to use code ROACHRC565, all caps, no spaces, at rctrophychasers.com. And lastly, we have A-Main Hobbies. I don't think I really need to explain them very much other than that they're probably the largest RC distributor in the United States. Anything and everything you guys purchase using the affiliate links in the description below, along with all of the discount codes I mentioned before, will directly support me and this channel as well. With that out of the way, let's begin. Friday was the beginning of the weekend and the first day of practice. Now, practice at the North GA Shootout works a bit differently compared to other practice situations in other events. It's not open practice all the time, and unlike other events like AMS or Roar style races, there's not a full-blown structure and schedule for when you're supposed to go up on the track and run certain heats. Instead, it goes something like this. First thing in the morning, there is an open practice where anyone can go onto the track and learn it. After that, practice is broken up into blocks where only certain class blocks are allowed on the track. The first block would be sportsman level drivers, the largest class in terms of drivers and the longest practice block in terms of allotted time. This is sort of to wear the track in and get it ready for the pro and intermediate drivers. After about 2 to 3 hours of sportsman drivers, there came the pro practice block. This block, there would be a chance for those willing to marshal the entirety of the hour and a half of pro practice to win some prizes, chief among them being a Sparco F8E kit. Pro classes being the smallest class and of course don't run as long as sportsmen and only go for about an hour and a half. After said hour and a half and some track maintenance that goes on for about 30 minutes, intermediate will be the next for about 2 hours. Since I was running intermediate e-buggy, I'll be running in this block. After about 2 hours of practice and another 30 minutes of track maintenance, open practice will be back up for those who could not make it earlier in the day. This open practice will go on for the rest of the day until about 10 p.m., after which the track would be closed for the day. At this point, I'd like to talk a little bit about the track itself and how my own practice went. The track itself was probably one of the best flowing and feeling tracks I've ever been on. It was just challenging enough to be worth going to and practicing, but it was simple enough to where you weren't racing the track and were instead racing each other. There were some spots that I myself had some issues with because of my own lack of skill, but for the most part I was able to buckle down and figure out the track pretty well. A fast lap on this track would be somewhere in the 28 second to 30 second lap time. I myself never really got below 30 seconds, but considering my own skill level, I didn't really need to be fast, I just needed to be really consistent. This was reflected in my own tire choice. I ended up going with the OGO Blizzards, or OGO Blizzards, for my 2 qualifiers and main, and they seemed to work pretty well. Other tire choices for this event included but were not limited to the J-Concepts Dirt Bites, J-Concepts Reflexes, J-Concepts Recons, J-Concepts Relapses, the OGO Twisters, and the VP Pro Blades along with the Proline Hole Shots, and Slide Locks. Some tire choices like the Blade, Relapse, and Slide Locks were faster than the more forgiving tires, and I did experiment with them during practice and with one qualifier, but I ended up going to the Ogo Blizzards for ease of use. As for how my own Agama N1E drove, well, it drove very well for me. There's a misconception that the Agama N1E can't really handle blown out tracks. This is incorrect. I was able to handle the big jumps, ruts, and features without much issue. The only real issue I had was a lack of side bite in certain sections of the track. Sometimes I had a lot less grip than I wanted, so drifting around corners was faster than taking them normally under certain circumstances. Then again, this could be said for A-Scale as a whole. Luckily, I wasn't the only person here running an Agama N1E. Will MacGyver was running the Pro class, and he was seemingly able to get a lot more speed out of the N1 and N1E, but from the looks of it, it would seem as though his car was a little bit more twitchy than mine. Much better for a more experienced driver like Will, but not so much for me. If you're curious about how he ended up placing 2nd in Pro E-Buggy and 4th in Pro Nitro Buggy. The next day, after a short early morning practice for those who couldn't arrive on Friday for any number of reasons, it was time for qualifying. Now last year when I got up to run, I ended up having some electrical issues, specifically my battery terminals coming out and messing with my run. Luckily for this run, I did not have this issue, and apart from a few wobbles here and there, I was able to finish 17th overall, pretty much right in the middle of intermediate buggy after the first qualifier. I was happy with that and went into the next qualifier with high hopes of doing even better. Unfortunately, my receiver had some other ideas. I managed to lose signal on the worst possible spot on the track and had to shout as loud as I could to make sure nobody hit me on the straightaway. After some diagnosing and general educated guessing, I figured the issue was the receiver getting too much dust in it. I then went back to my pit table, opened up the receiver box and for the receiver and found both were absolutely caked in dust. I hit them both with compressed air and electrical cleaner, and then proceeded to rebuild and double check everything on my car before my third qualifying round. Not feeling 100% faith in my electronics at that moment, I didn't really push the car or myself as hard as I could have, and as a result dropped down a few places to 20th overall. Still good enough to net me a B main placement. One of the things I learned when it comes to arena-style A-Scale races is to use the time you have in between runs to the best of your advantage. Going through your car and making sure everything is set up and ready to go is a very good usage of your time, especially since the tracks normally built for these A-Scale races tend to be much more demanding than other RC tracks around the country and even the world. Not only that, but making sure your car is clean will do wonders in helping you figure out if something is going wrong. Like for example, if your front shock pops off and leaks oil over the place. Yeah, that happened in qualifier number 1. Though I was able to still finish the run. Now, day 3. Unlike Roar races or other races around the world, there are bump spots for those able to make it into the top 3 of the lower mains. Also, unlike the higher double A mains which were 8 minutes, the lower mains, specifically the lower electric mains, were 10 minutes. So even if I had a bad start, I would have the time to make up the difference. If you're curious about how my B main went, it went something like this.
There we go. Rewind Robin. No, not again.
Literally, the first corner I managed to hit the pipe and flip over, taking myself out of the running pretty damn quickly. There's a saying in RC racing that goes something like this: you can't win in the first lap. Well, let me tell you, you can absolutely lose in the first lap very easily, especially if your mental fortitude is gone. I'm usually pretty chill when I'm on the driver's stand, and when I'm having a bad run, I'm very good at hiding my own displeasure and able to settle back into a groove before the race ends. This was not the case here. Mentally, I was pretty out of it by the first corner pile-up, and another string of crashes. I was kind of out of the race mentally. Not really focused on doing well, and more just wanting to get another shot that, since I placed 11th in the B main, I would certainly not get. Now this is something I wanted to touch on when running a large race, and that's how people tend to drive. At a club race, people tend to drive a bit more, let's say respectfully, as everyone knows everyone there. At a large race like this, things can get more ruthless and bumpy. People tend to drive more aggressively, take chances and passes that normally wouldn't take at home, and overall tend to drive much harder than at their home track. Of course, this is to be expected as people want to do well at events like these, so the aggressive driving can be forgiven up to a point. It's at this point where I say that the next video I'll be going over the mental side of RC racing and how to do better with nothing more than mental tricks and practice as I really should have used at this race. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more. Also, if you'd like to support me another way, you can subscribe to my Patreon, where I post updates and teasers as to when my videos are going to come out, as well as another surprise coming next Thursday. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my active patrons Michael Williams, RC World Discord server, Casey Nix, Ben Reeves, Dave Armstrong, Rob Bedingfield, Caden Merks, Ian Petrie, Zach Hawes, Jeffrey Kunz, and especially Buddy Howell and Morrison Watt. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.